if you belong to a company that doesn't have standardized process, your company is probably going to go out of business eventually. Continuous improvement is something that you should implement in your company. It should be part of your DNA to improve, right? We all should have problem solving tools and a consistent set of problem solving tools. Six Sigma is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, because you're going into, say, a company to solve a problem. And if you don't really understand the methodology to solve the problem and have experience with it, you're going to do more harm than good.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside. Today's guest is Kevin Clay. Kevin is the founder of Six Sigma Development Solutions, Inc., a leading provider of Lean Six Sigma certification and training. As an author and expert in Lean Six Sigma, Kevin has trained thousands of professionals, guiding them on their journey to become effective leaders and change agents in their industries. His approach blends real-world experience with practical tools, empowering teams to drive lasting transformation. And if it can be said that we learn more from our mistakes than from our successes, Kevin is a guy that we can learn a lot from, right, Kevin?
Absolutely. Excellent. That was a good
He literally
transition there.
wrote the book on why the Lean Six Sigma implementations fell. So we're going to have a fun conversation today
so
about.
Back there, right?
Yeah, wonderful. So, what's new in your world, Kevin? Where are you at today?
I am in Pensacola Beach, Florida. Enjoying the sunny weather coming out of my right side window here. I live on the Pensacola Beach, and we just finished with the Blue Angels week and weekend. So that was fun.
Cool. Yeah, Florida is a little too hot for me this time of year.
Yeah, I've been in Salt Lake and I love it there. It's an awesome place, but I like a little bit lower elevation.
Yeah, sometimes people have a hard time breathing up high in
Yeah.
the mountains. So, oh, that's great. Well, hey, Kevin, we like to get our podcast started with a little segment we call the Spark. What do we find a lot of times, folks in this Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement discipline? Obviously, you've got a company built around this. You've turned this into your passion. I'm curious if there was a particular moment in time that you recall where you felt like, I think I want to make this my career.
To think way back in college, I had a professor that would get sidetracked and would tell stories. He was a quality consultant on the side. Most of your professors do consulting on the side, and he would come into class not very often. He usually had TAs teach, but when he'd come into class, we get him sidetracked on these stories, and he would spend the whole class telling stories of the different companies that he has been in and made, transformational changes, and that enamored me. So I was on the way to being an engineer and on my way to being being an officer in the Air Force. So I wasn't really going to take that path, but eventually, those stories really drew me towards the company, going into companies and really making those transformational changes.
That's excellent. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do there at Six Sigma Development Solutions.
Six Sigma Development Solutions is really kind of a training company. So we have several disciplines. We do on-site training. So companies find us over the web. We do what's called SEO. We show up very high in certain key terms like Six Sigma Dallas, Six Sigma Salt Lake. They call us up and they start the conversation with us. And most of the time, that's all it is in the beginning, is they just really want to know what Lean Six Sigma is, how this can help themselves or their company. And throughout that conversation, we make them feel comfortable with us. We make them feel comfortable because everything we teach, everything we do, we put up on the web. Everybody can see every tool, every class that we teach. It's all out there for free. So a lot of people go to our articles and really digest what we do. and they come back to us, and I hear this over and over again. It's, I really know you. I haven't met you. I haven't talked to you, but I've read your articles. I see your social media posts, your LinkedIn, and I really know what you do. So I feel really comfortable having the conversation, and that leads them to come into our class. How we're different than I think other companies is, and I think we're going to talk about this today, is what our mission, our goal is. Our goal is to produce effective practitioners of Lean and Six Sigma. So many different certifications out there. A lot of people kind of jump on board and they give a test. And they give a test, and that test certifies somebody to do something. But all that really does is certify you to take a test, or it says you know how to study. It doesn't necessarily you know how to do that thing, right? So we tell everybody that comes into our class, we have different ways of certifying, tests being one of them, but we really focus on completing a project, actually adding money to our company's bottom line, using tools to really start to understand what causes a problem and how to solve that problem. And we get quite a few people that basically come back and tell us, well, I just want to get certified. And that always baffles me, because think of it as, what if surgeons could certify that way, right? Go out and take a test, walk into a hospital and do complex surgery, right? You're going to kill somebody. So I often think of Lean Six Sigma practitioners as kind of correlated to a surgeon, because their job is to go in and diagnose a process, right? And understand the best way to fix it by experiential tools, and by using data. And again, if I'm sitting down, I'm having my gallbladder taken out, I don't want somebody who's walks in that I ask for their experience, and they say, "Well, I've read a book about it. I took a test, and yeah, hey, I'm good."
So, Kevin, I love this to start this conversation. You might say kind of high level with what is this Lean Six Sigma thing, and where does it fit into my world for, let's say a listener out there? Because as we go from individuals in this spark, this idea of continuous improvement, it's something that's inside of all of us. And for some of us, we find this discipline of this thing in work where we can actually, most of us have to work and got to do something to earn a living. And there's lots of different things that you can do, but there's the find it, particularly in the people that I talk to in my bias sphere, people love this work. People that are in this Lean Six Sigma thing. They really are passionate about their jobs in a way that I don't see in every job out there. Like, I talk to marketers, and some marketers are just like, well, I know how to do it, and so this is what I do, but I don't love what I do. There's plenty of people in other industries who don't love what they do. But I find a lot of people who find this work really interesting and really rewarding. So think that you guys work with all sorts of different sizes of companies. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Very, very small companies up to multi-billion dollar, multinational companies
Okay.
all over the world, in almost every continent.
And I think the thing that I want to point out here and present to our audience and our listeners is that this thing, this Lean Six Sigma thing, in particular, the stuff that Kevin's company does, is relevant to individuals who are simply trying to like get ahead in their career, maybe just like learn some new skills to advance their career. It's very relevant if you're, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you found some cool thing and you started building something, and now all of a sudden you find yourself as a manufacturer and you're having some success and you're trying to figure out how to keep up with demand and all of this
Right?
stuff.
Yes,
Or
yes,
if you're the CEO of a huge multinational conglomerate that has dozens of facilities across multiple different countries, there's something in here for everybody like
yes,
that.
yes. Absolutely.
Now, I know that we wanted to spend some time talking about some of the failure modes, and there's lots of different places where, let's say, this lean strategy, this lean initiative can fail. One of the early on places that it might fail might be what we'd call like executive buy-in a little bit. And I think that when an organization says, hey, we want to do this lean thing, sometimes that gets transferred down and it turns into just like a belt program where people are trying to just get belts for the sake of getting belts. I know there's been a lot of conversation on social media about whether you should care about belts or not care about belts. You have a term that I think is particularly interesting, the paper belt. Tell us about what a paper belt is.
A paper belt. A paper belt is somebody that gets the certification, gets the paper. Think of when you go to college, all right? So some people go to colleges where they take courses that they might not get into a career because of that, but they graduate from college and they have a piece of paper, and that piece of paper for a lot of companies says you know how to do something, right? But they don't really come with practical knowledge. They don't come with a project portfolio. They don't come with experience. So a paper belt is really somebody that goes out, and because Lean and Six Sigma and all of these certification process, most of them there is no standardization to them. So you can have a test, a Lean Six Sigma green belt test, yellow belt test, black belt, that could be a 2-day class. I've had clients call me up saying, I wanted to take your course, but it's too long. And they take this class and they take a 20-question test, and that test is basically you can take it over and over until you pass it, right? So you're going to get your certification, but that doesn't mean you know what you're doing. So paper belt to me is somebody who has the certificate, the credential, but has no experience. And back when we talk about a surgeon, you wouldn't want a surgeon, doing complex surgery on you that doesn't have that experience. We have disciplines like electrician or plumber, where you have to go through a step process, right? From a beginner to a journeyman, to show that you have that knowledge, because some of these could be very dangerous things. Well, you think about Six Sigma. Six Sigma is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, because you're going into, say, a company to solve a problem, and if you don't really understand the methodology to solve the problem and have experience with it, you're going to do more harm than good. And unfortunately, companies hire paper belts because the companies don't really understand what the true criteria is. They just see, I've got a certain certification, and therefore you're certified as a black belt, so that's good enough for me. And they go into the companies and again, can cause more harm than good. I've seen these. I've seen black belts. I've seen green belts that we go into a company to help them transform, and we talk to these green belts or black belts, and they don't even understand something as simple as a difference between CPK and PPK, which is a process capability. And that's something that us as practitioners, that's a foundation of what we do, right?
So would you mind taking us through just like the belt progression? Imagine that I'm not familiar with the colors, but what's the very first belt that somebody doesn't know anything about Lean Six Sigma might get?
The progression kind of follows the martial arts, right? Has nothing to do with martial arts except for the discipline. And the first is a white belt. So in the martial arts, you are, in ancient Japan, you're given a white belt, right? A brand new belt. And then you progress and you practice, and eventually that belt gets dirty and it becomes yellow, right?
I
And
like
and you practice and you have more experience, and eventually it becomes black or green, and then black. And then if you, again, I'm not quoting from this, my direct knowledge, but I believe they get a red belt, and a red belt is if you go to war.
I hadn't realized that correlation. That makes a ton of sense, but that actually makes it a little bit easier to follow about the progression. I was never in martial arts like growing up, and so like white belt, purple belt, black belt, whatever. Like I knew black belt was like the top, and I really didn't know the other ones. Let me ask you this specifically. So we've got a white belt, we've got a yellow belt, we've got a green belt, and a black belt. If I'm working inside of a company, maybe I'm a manager and I've been told that I need some belts or something, what might you be able to expect from somebody who has a white belt versus somebody who has a green belt versus somebody who has a black belt? Like, what does that kind of
Well,
signify in terms
let's
of what they
let's
might
talk
be able to
about
do?
the delineation between the belts. All right. So Lean and Six Sigma or continuous improvement is something that you should implement in your company. That's the purpose of it. It's to provide for a better bottom line. Every company should, it should be part of your DNA to improve, right? We all should have problem solving tools and a consistent set of problem solving tools. So the belts fall in line as to their role in continuous improvement. A white belt is just a really high level understanding of what you're doing. All right. Be it lean, be it Six Sigma, be it, whatever you want to call it. They're just a very high level. In most classes, that's usually a 4 to 8 hour class, just so that you understand the concepts of Six Sigma and variation and lean and waste and flow and pull and all that good stuff. They're not change agents, but that is somewhat of a lie because they are actually the change agent. Because a green belt or a black belt, they don't make change. The green belts or black belts don't create the change. The change is created by the people that are on the floor, the people that are part of the process every day, and those people they should be white belts. The reason we train white belts is because if a green belt comes into an organization or is in an organization and calls on these subject matter experts, that people on the floor, that are in the job, that are boots on the ground, if he or she calls them in and says, okay, we're going to work on improving this process, if they don't understand what's going on, they are going to be inherently fearful. All right. So the whole purpose of a white belt course is to belay fear, is to get rid of that fear, is to let them understand that I'm not going to improve myself out of a job. I didn't do something wrong. I'm going to help you. I'm going to be the catalyst to improve the process. And so out of the white belt course, those people should leave that going, man, this is awesome. This is good. So that's the white belt. The white belt is the foundation. You can't prove a process unless you have the people with the knowledge. This is not done in most companies.
Would you say that a white belt will teach you like the concepts and some of the language
Yes.
to interact in a lean company, to identify waste and understand a process,
Yes.
understand
Yes.
things like respect and how important that is?
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's just giving that foundation to continuous improvement by having everybody speak the same language and everybody knowing where we're heading with this. But then from the white belt is everybody in the company or in the scope of the implementation, but it's everybody that's going to be part of projects is going to be affected by this deployment. So that's a white belt. A yellow belt is teams that exist within functions. Yellow belts can't work on multifunctional problems, meaning I'm trying to see if there is a difference between 3 shifts and OEE. They can't do that because they don't have the statistical tools to analyze this through data. So a yellow belt is just a basic root cause analysis person. They're only allowed to make changes within their function because there's not a lot of variation in that function. So in a deployment of Lean Six Sigma, those people will be taking very small Kaizen projects. And in a lot of places, we have what we call Gemma management, where we have everything out in their area, like a lean board, that tells us how we're doing with 5S, how we're doing with our throughput, how we're doing with safety. This is the lowest level of change agents, all right? But they can't take on green belt projects. They can't take on black belt projects. Unfortunately, a lot of companies would go into want to train yellow belts, but have them take on these projects because they don't really understand the delineation between the different levels of this methodology. And part of that is precipitated by training that get trained with something without having the real experience. They just take a test or take a 2-hour class test and boom, I'm a green belt.
The progression from white to green, it sounds like that could happen pretty quickly.
Yes.
Like you could go from no knowledge to white to yellow fairly quickly in most maybe even as part of like an employee orientation or onboarding process.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, most people that want this as a professional development class, all right, green belt is where they'll start. So if I call Kevin and his team and I want to go to one of their classes in Dallas or in San Francisco, these people come from all different walks of life into our central class, and we teach them the green belt. and we carry them through. And in our case, we have a 5-day green belt, and then we mentor them for 6 months afterwards in their project. So it's a great professional development tool, but a lot of people come into our class and we think they're just there for professional development, but we engage them and say, okay, what's the catalyst for this? Why are you doing this? And they say, well, my company has commissioned me. I used to work on the floor. I'm now the continuous improvement lead, never done continuous improvement, and they expect me to come back and solve problems, right? Which if that happens, right off the bat that you're being set up for failure. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happens. So Lean Six Sigma is just a phenomenal tool, and it gives you a huge amount of tools that will make you become a better employee, or that will make you more viable in the marketplace. But Lean Six Sigma, when inserted into a company to improve the company, to make sustainable change, you have to separate those two. So I know that KPI Fire is really more about professional development, that spark. And this spark is I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm a zealot. I talk about it everywhere, right? To everybody, even those who don't want to listen to it, because it is the greatest methodology. I think every company, every person, everybody wants to improve. We all have the innate want to make things better. It's like when you sit across the table from your wife and she's, talking about all the bad things that went on that day, right? You're just waiting for her to finish for you to start telling her what she should do, right? We're all innately predisposed to solve problems. And you think about companies, if companies don't improve, you remember Kmart? Remember Kmart back in the 80s, 90s, right? Where do you see Kmart anymore? Because Kmart didn't understand the concept of continuously improving. I can tell you thousands of companies that have gone out of business because they didn't really understand the process of it, continuously improving their process, right? So I could have these green belts, black belts that I bring into my company, and those green belts and black belts have great knowledge. But if they don't have an infrastructure to come into that allows them to make changes, the changes they make won't sustain.
So the green belt is it's definitely a milestone. There's probably, I mean, there's probably a lot more white and yellow belts just because that's an easy one to get. But green belt is, I would say it's like a very, I don't know if common denominator is probably not the right math term to use, but it's a building block that you'll understand in this lean world quite a bit. And green belt a lot of times is correlated with a green belt project or an improvement project of some point. And I think one of your points is having one green belt in your organization does not solve all of your problems necessarily.
No, and that's what a lot of companies do is they get Joey Bag of Donuts here, and they say, okay, you're going to be my new CI guy, and then go get trained for 5 days and come back and finish your project, and then I'm going to go and identify problems for you to solve. And most of those problems that they identify aren't Six Sigma problems; they're just moving things around, justifying a system or whatever, and without having the infrastructure of identifying the right projects, identifying what your targets are of your company, it can demoralize a green belt. A green belt comes into a company wanting to do well, has learned some tools, but because the structure doesn't allow them to do that, it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. In singularity, a green belt, a yellow belt, a white belt, these are just phenomenal tools. But if you insert them into the wrong culture that doesn't have the infrastructure to sustain that culture, they're going to walk into something that they really can't survive nor succeed in.
At a green belt level, let's say we're making the assumption that they're inside a functional culture. What
Okay.
should somebody be able to expect from a green belt who's gone through one of your trainings and been successful there? Like what kind of,
Sure.
what should the business in general like consider them capable of doing?
Okay. So a green belt is only a green belt about 25% of the time. So they have another job. Green belts take on multifunctional problems. All right. So they have to know some statistics to be able to evaluate those problems. And that's really the core of our class is we make sure we tell our students that you will not pass our class unless you can prove something statistically has happened. So I'll kind of take you through a quick progression. So we teach things like the charter. In the charter, in the defined phase, it's very important that a green belt be able to identify the present state of the process in numbers, not in just I think it looks like that, right? I need to have a data set of numbers, all right, that tell me either the mean or the median of the beginning state. And so when you can do that, you can understand exactly where you are. That's your starting line of the race. You also need to be able to understand what exactly your goal is. Your goal is not I want to get better. My goal has to be a number. My goal has to be a data point. So that helps me to understand what my beginning state is, my starting line, and my finish line. That tells me my delta. That tells me the distance between the two, right? This is where things like the measure stage. So in the measure stage is where we go in and we say, okay, so we're at this point. Let's make sure that our data is reliable so we can actually prove that's where we're at. Not only that, make sure that when we analyze data, that the data is actually worth analyzing, right? You've heard the term being in IT, garbage in, garbage out. So in the measure phase, we do things like the control chart, capability chart to understand our current capability. All right, MSA, so that we understand what our current measurement system, if it is reliable or not. Because if it's not, you can't move into the analyze phase because you're analyzing data that's not true. So we move into the analyze phase, and this is where we start to use something called a multivariate sheet. The multivariate sheet is where I've got picture a Excel spreadsheet. Row A is your Y, and I've got thousands of rows of row A. So maybe I'm looking at reducing PO processing time, and I want to get it down from X to Y. Every time I process PO, it's going to give me a data point. Yeah. Okay. And so column B, column C, column D, E, and F, all that, these are all of the X's that it impact that Y. So when I have that one data point for a PO, somebody did that PO. It was done at some facility at some time, right? It may be certain type of PO. So all of these end up being X's that affect the Y. But the thing is, you don't know how those X's all work together to affect a Y. So you have to have a decoder ring. And that decoder ring is statistics. You can't, unless you're Rain Man, you can't look at that data and say exactly what it's telling you. The data hidden in that data is the answer. We don't tend to use data to get the answer. We just have our people sit in the ivory tower and talk about what the problem is and then solve the problem without even including the SMEs, right? Which is ludicrous.
Subject matter experts.
Yes, subject matter experts, what I call the PhDs of the process, because most of them have been there 8 or 10 years, right? They know what they're doing. From that analyze phase, from that data, we do something called hypotheses testing, where we see through statistics what has an effect on the Y. And that has to lead us next into the improve phase. So once we identify significant inputs into the process that's causing the problem through data, not through, uh, uh, 5 Ys or fishbones. This comes from true exact data that tells us exactly what's going on. In the improve phase, we then have to improve those inputs because we know those have the most effect. And once we improve them, they should have an effect, right? And so that effect should be able to be statistically analyzed and proven that the effect was what we had in our charter. So all of a sudden, you're taking yourself and bias and agenda out of it. You're just using data to solve a problem. For most people, that's scary. Nobody wants to do that. We all hated stats class in college, right? But that is the only way you can truly solve a problem and understand exactly what's happening to that problem as you go through this process. And that's why this process is so just phenomenal.
Sticking on this progression from the belts, give us what does it mean, or what's the difference going from a green belt to a black belt, maybe in terms of either time or
Sure.
achievements or value to an organization? What does that journey look like?
A green belt is almost like a journeyman in a plumber or electrician, right? So a lot of people want, I get calls every day. I want to just jump to the black belt. Can I just get a black belt, right? And skip the green belt, which makes me laugh every time I hear it. The green belt is a stepping stone to where we get experience to understand what's going on. Green belts only work on past historical information, okay, things that have happened. Black belts are belts that look at experiments, so they look into the future. As a green belt, we learn things like through regression, understanding what are the key inputs affect a Y through historical data. A black belt can say, okay, we've gotten to a certain point of optimizing the process. I just had a black belt certify here recently from the Army Ignited, which is a system to professionally develop our Army soldiers. And he's an officer, and he did a project on producing orders or certifying orders, right? And he did a black belt project. So he took this to a certain optimization level with regression, and it said, okay, these are the inputs that are really causing the problem. But he said, this didn't get me to where I needed to go. So I then had to experiment using what's called design of experiments, which again, I'm telling you, this project is a service project. It's not a manufacturing project. I can tell you 1,000 of them. And he took that, he then the optimal level, and then he improved his process to meet that optimal level. And now the lead time for his order processing has gone down to what he wanted it to go down to. But the green belt level tools didn't take him there. So black belt should have been a green belt for many projects, green belt over and over again, right? Until they get comfortable with those green belt tools, then they start to look into the future with the optimization.
Kevin, let me take an angle here on just the belt program in general. There's stuff on LinkedIn and social media where people are saying, I may be paraphrasing a little bit, but belts are worthless. Don't bother with that, because what you really need is people that solve problems and people know how to solve business problems, and don't worry about belts. Obviously, you're in the business of the belt progression, so I'm assuming that you have an opinion on that. What are some of the reasons why somebody might want to buy into that very traditional white, yellow, green, black belt language and system?
I don't necessarily disagree with the people on LinkedIn. I think it's just tools, right? It's just a way of delineating and formalizing where you are in that tool set. So whether you want to call it level 1, level 2, level 3, white belt, yellow belt, black belt, or you want to name it whatever you want to in your company, it really doesn't matter. It's a general way that we have identified different levels of change agent practitioners as they travel through the process, right? So again, I don't necessarily disagree with them, but I do disagree with not having a delineation. I think to have a full standardized process, right? You and I both know, and I'm sure everybody that's listening, if you belong to a company that doesn't have standardized process, your company is probably going to go out of business eventually.
Yeah. You know what? Kind of a funny analogy that just came to mind for me is I'm in Utah. It gets cold here in the wintertime. Sometimes people will travel. Have you ever traveled somewhere where you weren't expecting the weather that you got? You're
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
oh, aren't
yeah.
they prepared?
Absolutely. Right.
Um, I don't know if you're a camper, if you've been camping or
I
whatnot, but
am. Yes.
imagine yourself going on a camping trip with somebody that you just met, a new friend, right? And this friend's like, yeah, I'm from Utah. I'm going to take you out to the desert. We're going to camp. And they forget to tell you how cold it can actually be in the desert at night, or how
Yeah.
cold it can be up in the
Right.
mountains. And
Yes.
I mean, it can be literally life and death. Like, if I was to say, yeah, I know how to camp, and I learned how to camp in Florida versus I learned how to camp in the high mountain Uintas, like that probably mean a different thing. But I can tell you one thing for sure. I was an Eagle Scout growing up. I know that the scouting program has changed a lot. If I meet somebody who is an Eagle Scout, particularly if they're like an Order of the Arrow Eagle Scout, I know that person can camp, right? Because
You know
I
what they're doing.
know
Yes.
the discipline that they had to go through to get that level of certification. And I think part of what you're saying is that not all green belt and black belt certifications are the same, that there's a difference between certain certifications.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The certification has become watered down. The certification, again, go out on the web and you'll find thousands of providers of green belts, black belts, yellow belts, whatever. And you will find a whole lot of variation between how to get that. And what I always say is if you take a test and get certified as a black belt, I'm going to know it. We pair ourselves with a lot of different staffing companies. So people go through staffing companies to get jobs, and some of them are Lean Six Sigma practitioners. And some staffing companies have basically said, we don't have the knowledge to vet these people, so they contract out to us, and we can tell very quickly if a applicant is knowledgeable or not. Yes, unfortunately, there is a wide variety. There are some good tests out there. We align ourselves with the IASSC, the International Association for Six Sigma Certification. But we always tell our students, when you sign up for our class, we teach about 40% on what's on the test. Our job is to make you a good practitioner. That's why our mentorship that we give you costs no more. We charge you for a class, but we actually give you 6 months of mentorship afterwards. We want to make sure that you know what you're doing. When you go into a company, that you have the knowledge and the background, and you have a project portfolio.
Let me take this question from two different perspectives. Let's say I'm in the job market and I want to differentiate my resume, and I actually got a green belt certification from your organization. Is there something I could do on my resume, or in terms of maybe a portfolio or something of
Sure,
my
sure.
project, to differentiate myself from somebody who was just went on to Chat GPT and got themselves a quick green belt
And
certification from
that's
AcmeCo?
very, very, very easy to do. I was a plant manager. I've held several positions at several different companies over my career, and a lot of times I did hiring, right? So I would have people that come in from technical schools that had the knowledge, and on their resume they would give me ideas of the different tools that they know how to use, and you could tell by the actual writing that they knew what they were doing. I had other students that came from some very big name schools, but had never really used any of these tools, right? And it was very obvious to see quickly that they didn't really understand how to use the tool. They went through the education, but there was no practical knowledge. So, and for me being a practitioner from that side and from the floor, starting on the floor, I could see the delineation between those two. So I tell everybody that goes into my class, keep a project portfolio, right? Every single project should end up in a template of tools that you've used to solve the problem, right? And then it should culminate into a presentation to where you summarize that. Those are
That makes a
great
lot of
things.
sense.
Yeah,
You know,
those are
I'm
great things.
thinking of different hires that I've made. Like if I'm going to hire a graphic designer or an artist for, like they always have portfolios of their work, right? Show me a portfolio of your work. They always
Right.
have it.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I'm going to hire a project manager, um, having a portfolio of projects that they work sounds like a great idea. Let me shift this question from the person trying to get hired to the hiring manager. Is it your recommendation that you should only hire people that have a certification, or like what might you put into your requirements that you're looking for a particular job? Like when would you say, hey, I need this person to have a green belt or a black belt, versus, hey, I just want somebody smart and I'm willing to train them on this? Where might you give us some guidance there?
That's really a good question. If I'm looking at somebody to hit the ground running, right? If I want to bring somebody in to be part of my CI team, um, and I don't want to train them. I want them to integrate in the team and start leading change with the people on the floor and provide for a culture. I'm going to want somebody who I see with some delineation that tells me that they're certified, right? And I'm only going to pick certain certifications because I know that a lot of certifications don't really hold any weight. So I'm going to pick those individual certifications, and I'm also going to ask them to show me project portfolio, or sit down and have an informal discussion with me about what have you done. Give me your past, give me your history. And from being from this discipline, I quickly am going to be able to pull it out. And that's what I want from my employees too, is to have that knowledge and that experience, to be able to, pick the practitioner out from the paper belt.
That's excellent. I just had a thought here. I'm thinking, this is education, right? Obviously, I'm thinking back to my own journey. This is going back 12 or 15 years ago. I'd graduated college 10 years before, and then I was going to go get an MBA. And so I started looking and shopping MBA programs. And MBA is probably like green belts, like you can spend $100,000 on one, and you could
Right.
spend maybe at the
Right.
time 60,000 or 15,000 or something. And for me, in my decision, I broke it down to three things that I could get out of getting that MBA. And I think this probably applies to a green belt or black belt. One was the education. And I kind of felt responsible for, like, I'm going to get out what I put in for the education. People can learn from books. People can learn online. If you're super interested in this stuff, you can find a lot of resources. I know Kevin has a bunch on his website, and we've got resources. If you're super interested in this subject, you can find the information. The second one for me was the letters, right? The certificate. And that, I thought, well, like, if somebody's looking for an MBA, like, any school that could give me that, I could probably qualify. Then the third one, and this is where I felt like was the biggest value between an MBA from Harvard or Stanford and an MBA from some other online school, was the cohort of people that I would be going to school with, right? Am I building relationships with people that have been there, done that might be able to help me in the future in the program? And that's one thing that you said a minute ago that I thought was really interesting. When somebody goes through a training with you, you mentioned, I think you said mentoring or coaching for a period of time. That sounds like something that might be really valuable to somebody who's trying to solve problems, because one thing that I know about life and business is today's problem is not going to be tomorrow's problem. They're going to be similar, but they're not going to be the same. And
Right.
being
Right.
connected to a community of people like yourself who has solved problems like maybe I am going to face a couple of years from now or next year would be kind of a valuable thing to have.
Yes. Yes. I think that to learn this, like anything, you have to have a mentor. I mean, people don't learn without mentors, unless you just jump into it and make the mistakes, right? But a mentor is there to keep you and guide you. So as part of our course, as part of our 6 months of mentorship that we give, we also have what's called a roadmap. All right. So I don't send, and I think you were talking about this. I don't send a student into a class and then them leave and take on the project and come back to me at the end of the project, because that's like sending somebody into battle with a fire breathing dragon with a wooden sword and a wooden shield. They're going to get killed. And you'll find, and anybody can do the research of this, but most companies have about a 35% project completion rate. All right, that's dismal.
It's
That is unreal. The reason that that happens is because we train the belt, we train the practitioner, and then we shove all these tools at them and then expect them to go through the whole process and survive at the end. And in that process, in the define phase, they'll make mistakes. In the measure phase, they'll make mistakes. But if you don't catch it, just like inspection, right? In manufacturing, do I want to inspect at the very end of the process, or do I want to inspect at small increments through the process, right? You're going to be able to catch things. So if you have a roadmap that not only has a DMAIC roadmap like DMAIC, but inside of that roadmap, you have different tools that are set up in sequence. KPI Fire does this, right? So you have a breakdown of these different tools that belong in the phase, and then that practitioner uses that tool to tackle that part of a problem, and that leads them to the next tool, that leads them to the next tool, that leads them to the next tool, right? So now you have a formal way of solving a problem, which increases your ability to solve the problem. Because if you don't have that, you're probably not going to solve the problem. It's going to be the never ending project. You get to the end, you're demoralized. Lean and Six Sigmas is not a good thing. And that's what happens in most companies. We don't provide that structure. We don't provide that structure for solving a problem. We just train the green belt, put him into a role, tell him to be the cops, take on projects that are identified by the people that really don't understand how to identify projects. It's not their fault. I mean, that has to be learned, right? And then we give them our project and tell them, come to me at the end when you finish it. And that rarely happens. So now you can kind of delineate that process from the process I'm telling you about, where you've got a structure, you've got projects that are prioritized to their effects on the KPIs. Every project we take is the next best one. We don't have to go out and find projects. We then take on a project. We take it on at a very level where we're tracked throughout our roadmap. And that whole time we have access to one or more mentors to help us through that project. That's continuous improvement.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com. That sounds like a great system to implement inside of the organization and a great way to deliver the training. So Kevin, there's some really great stuff right there. And I would love to talk for hours about this, but I think we should save some content for maybe a future episode. We'd love to have you come back. And again, in case I didn't mention it before, we also had Kevin on back in episode 3, where we talked about some of the reasons why lean programs can fail. There's so much good content. There's so much to learn. I know that I'd love to have a conversation to follow up with you on like rituals or behavior patterns, systems that people can in place to make sure that they're successful with this program. So before we end today, let me just run you through. I've got a little section, a set of rapid fire questions that I like to ask. So I'll just throw these at you. You can just give me a quick response to these.
Sure.
The first one is, the most important job of a leader is to blank.
The most important job of a leader is to be a follower.
Be a follower.
Is to lead from behind and not from in front. To be the guide on the side, not the stage, not the sage on the stage.
I like that one. This is an easy one for you, I believe. What's one book that you recommend?
I mean, I would say my book, but I've got some great books back here. You can see behind me, and one book I've read every year since I was, I think, 18, The Goal by Elihu Goldratt. The phenomenal book really helped me to understand that there are more methodologies out there. They're just a big toolbox, right? And The Goal helped me to understand to really start looking for the constraint in the process. And I go into companies and I say, you're solving this problem, but is this problem truly the one you need to solve? So if you don't understand your system, you don't know if that's the constraint. If that's not the constraint and you're trying to improve your process's ability to do something, you're going to make one small department look good, but it's not going to do any good.
I'm a huge fan of that book, The Gold. The other one that's related to that is the Goldratt's Rules of Flow that I've discovered.
Yes,
Relatively,
it's a
I
great
love
book.
that one too. So
Yes,
another great one. Any thought leaders besides yourself, of course, that you might recommend, or people that have influenced your journey in this?
And I mean, I've had so many thought leaders. I follow a lot of people on LinkedIn. One person taught me in UT Arlington, and I became a black belt through his course. I can't remember his exact name, but he's been there for many, many years, and he is just a pure practitioner. He doesn't boast. He knows what he's talking about. He's one of those people, that humbles you. He would probably be one of those.
Okay, this is maybe an unfair question because you train on these tools, but if you
Right.
were stranded on a desert island and you only had
Right.
one tool from your toolbox, your Lean Six Sigma toolbox, what is your go-to tool, the one that you don't want to be without?
And that's a good question because none of those are going to help me survive on enough. maybe my book so I can light it on fire and make a fire.
Okay, maybe not on the desert island. What's like the go-to tool that you
I
find
would
yourself?
tell you that the go-to tool that I use that is the most unsung hero in continuous improvement anywhere, and that's the Pareto chart. So we tend to want to everybody tends to want to solve all the problems, right? And then we get overwhelmed and people think Six Sigma is just this methodology. There's no way I can do this. There's so many problems. How can I focus on one? If you understand how to use a Pareto chart and understand the value of your company, your process, and can put that in a Pareto chart, you will find out the 20% of your problem that is causing you 80% of your pain. All of a sudden, your problems aren't that big.
I love it. That's a great answer to that question. That's a tough one because there's so many good tools, but that's a
There
great one.
is, yes, but Pareto is always my go-to.
One of mine, I change my answer every time I ask this question, really. But one that I'm thinking of today is the problem statement. Like, what is the problem to solve?
Yes,
I find
yes,
myself sometimes in conversations with people where 5, 10, 50 minutes, 5 hours, like you were like, what are we working on here? What is the
yeah.
problem to
What's the
solve?
problem? Yeah,
Why are we having this conversation? That's a great one.
yes.
Okay, one last one. Finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is blank.
Fun.
Fun. Oh, that's a
It's
good
fun.
one
It's
to end
fun.
with.
I'm a zealot. I love it. I've improved. I won't say improve. I've been a part of addressing hundreds of thousands of problems all over the world, and I see something new every day.
Well, that's awesome. Hopefully, our listeners today have gotten something of value out of this podcast. If nothing else, if you see the Six Sigma Development Inc. Certification on a resume, hopefully it means that you can trust that candidate and know that they went through a rigorous process.
Nice. One more thing. Again, you see the book behind me, Why They Fail. And I've started a podcast. There are only 5 episodes into it. The podcast has the same name, Why They Fail, but we actually call it WTF, and it
WTF.
has a little bit of meaning. A great podcast, and this kind of goes into the book Why They Fail and these concepts of why how companies tend to fail at this, but it also shows you how to succeed.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us here today. I really look forward to having you come back again. And
Yeah,
this is
definitely.
always fun conversations. Again, love to discuss all things about continuous improvement. So thanks so much for joining us here today. If folks want to follow or find your website, do you want to share a website URL or anything,
Sure,
any other place
sure.
that you recommend that you want them to go to?
Our company URL is Six Sigma DSI. That's SIXSIGMA DSI. That's Delta Sam India.com. SixSigmaDSI.com. On that site, you can find the book, free book, and we'll offer it to anybody who wants to look at it for free. We'll leave some notes in the show notes and the podcast. You can click on the podcast.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Kevin. We really appreciate you. And for everybody, thanks for listening. Until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.